What up? What up? What up? This is your man, Sean P, coming in with a banger. I guarantee you that, man. This is a very, very special experience on YouTube. I have a wonderful guest. I cannot wait. I am honored to share this with the world. The book not even out yet. This is a very special exclusive. I can't wait till y'all hear and see my sister on the screen, Tamela J. Gordon. Let me do an official rundown first. Make it official. Tamela J. Gordon is a freelance writer, editor, discerning book critic, and a passionate communal care advocate. After years of relying on online fundraisers for medical and housing needs, Gordon relocated to New York, from New York to Miami, where she briefly turned her cozy little Havana apartment into a makeshift retreat. Fundraising to cover the expenses for guests to stay and explore self-care, healing, and joy. Through her writing, Gordon strives to uplift and empower others, fostering a sense of self-belonging and nurturing personal growth. My amazing guest, how you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for that intro. I was like, that's a writer right there.
You are funny. You are funny. You know what? I have a different, I have a standard introduction for the show, but you told me something this morning today. I want to share with the public, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You told me about your book having the Kirkus review. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, I was just told this morning by my publisher that Hood Wellness received a Kirkus starred review. And I know that they're very limited that go out per genre every year. And Hood Wellness is a book. It's an indie publisher, Row House Publishing. And I'm self-taught, so we're really excited right now that we're getting this kind of recognition, and that the book is being discussed and honored. I think like it come out June 18th, so it's like another 2.5 months, something like that. So it feels like it's on a good track right now.
I would say, and you know what? My personal opinion, I told you this off the camera. I see this book at a lot of women festivals, women empowerment. All my sisters out there, the sororities, AKAs, the deltas, y'all go and support my sister, follow the sister. Y'all gonna need this to discuss this, man. Hood wellness. Swear is that. Swear is that. So I'll get into this in a second. This show was called Sitting with the Griots. The Griots, the African storytellers, the keepers of the tale. How do you feel about being called a modern day griot, or for the ladies, grioties for the ladies? How do you feel about that moniker? And does it feel like a heavy obligation on your shoulders with a heavy duty? How do you embrace that time?
You know, I feel like as a storyteller, my objective is to hold space, whether it's my story or somebody else's story, a story that kind of reflects all of us. Um, and I love that. It gives my writing a lot of purpose. So even with Hood Wellness, once I had gotten signed, I knew I was like, oh, I'm about to spit. But I want to know a couple of other people that can talk about some of this stuff that I can't really talk about. I know life from my perspective, but there's other ends of the spectrum when it comes to survival mode and health and wellness. And instead of me telling everybody else's story, I wanted them to tell their own. So I'm a big advocate of being a griot and of really knowing the root of that, like the power of that. um and I'm excited that people are aware with Hood Wellness that that's the backbone of it. We're not necessarily trying to um change or educate. We're trying to present, we're holding space. And what readers do for that is that's kind of when it becomes personal. um but I don't know. I rock with it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about this beautiful, amazing cover, man. This thing looks great. They said don't judge a book by the cover. I don't know who made that crazy statement up. this thing is fire. So tell us about the making of this cover, and did they have like different iterations of it, different variations of it? What was the process like making this?
Um, we had a. It's funny because I want to. I see at the bottom. I think it is a question of, so you spend time reading and researching the other people before writing those bars. Um, if there are people that I did not have that were no longer living, yeah, I had to write. I had to read their biographies, things of that nature. Um, and outside of that, I would invite actual people to write their own story. But regarding the cover, I knew it had to look unambiguously black. And there's so much hype right now with black literature and bannings and what is appropriate. And it gets to a point where they say, don't use the word black. Don't put a black woman on the cover. Don't make it too ambiguous. Don't make it look as though it is a black book, because then no one will read it. And that narrative really suggests that black people don't read. And so I knew that the cover had to be unambiguous, just to prove that like the opposite is true. And even though we know the opposite is true, to be intentional with it is to kind of dispel that little myth right there, you know? So I knew sis had to have a bonnet on. I knew she had to have the bamboo earrings on. My publicist, I mean, pardon me, my publisher just this morning was making jokes about the cover, about how I was so adamant on the way that the bonnet would look. I don't want anybody to think it was a shower cap. I didn't want anybody to think that it was, like tongue in cheek. It had to be authentic. It had to be really true in its presence. She had to look like somebody you would sit next to on the bus.
Yeah, yeah.
you
No,
know,
I don't know the actual artists, but whoever they are, they did a phenomenal, amazing job. Tell them I said that.
I sure will. I know their names are Janae. I'm terrible with names that I don't want to mispronounce, but I'm definitely going to put it in the comments
Okay,
because they are for
okay, cool.
hire.
Oh, great. See, we're all about employing people for sure,
Yeah.
right? So let's talk about the full title: Pool Wellness, a tale of communal care for people who drowned on dry land. People who drowned on dry land. Break that down.
So it's a long years ago. I remember using that metaphor of I'm drowning on dry land because I was broke and nobody else was broke. It felt like everybody had money. It felt like everybody had money to get Jordans. Everybody had money to eat out every night. And I didn't have it. And I had the same job as everybody else. And I was always like, I'm the only one drowning on dry land out here. And it really is a nod to the impact that a lot of us that navigate marginalized intersections, we have very unique challenges that most don't have. And I know there's that phrase in our community: when America gets a cold, Black people get pneumonia. And it goes back to that point of the more marginalized you are, the more you're going to feel it. So anytime there was something that related to oh, the market, things are going up, or anything in life, COVID, I would be so impacted by these changes. And of course, everyone was impacted. So it wasn't like, oh, it's just me. But it was like, but why am I broke immediately? Why does it look like there's people that have other resources, connections? And I got my mom and my dad. I got a friend back home, but I don't have any of these. People got bank accounts, plural, things like that. And so when I say on dry land, it really is for those of us that go through these problems that for somebody else might just be a problem. But when it happens to us, it becomes that game changer. And it has a lot to do with the intersection and where we were before that.
Well, let's springboard off what you just said, right? So the book Hood Wellness, Hood Wellness, not any other kind of wellness out there in the industry. We're talking about hood wellness. You did a good job breaking down in the intro, talking about like how the self care industry has boomed, but it's more like a luxury thing. To go
Hmm.
to the spa and get your face steamed and all the stuff that they do, and go to these different bath houses and masseuse and that the little mimosas and like all the things you see for self care. It does seem to be like you got to be a certain person to even get self care.
Yeah.
How does self care look when you barely have anything? How does self care look? You don't have a vehicle. How does self care look whenever you don't have nothing? How
Mm.
do you still have hood wellness? Talk about that.
Um, I would say for myself, as well as several of the other essayists in the book, it always goes to our immediate needs. And to go back to one thing that you say that is so true about how, right now, wellness is very consumer driven. Self care is very consumer driven. Self care is also used as a way, just another form of isolation. Do it on your own, do it by yourself. You fix it, you cure it. And the reality of that is self care is very limiting. And it's also subjective because self-care is as much as pampering as it is in having disposable time to sit down for 20 minutes at a time. But when we are so convinced that you got to afford it, you got to earn it, you got to have this kind of proximity to it, suddenly you're convinced that you shouldn't even sit down. So a lot of hood wellness is about identifying those needs. And one thing about your immediate needs is they're interchangeable. And it's kind of it's like, I would say this is where hood wellness dances with self improvement, but doesn't really dive into that. More so, we show what it looks like for everyone else. But identifying those needs is really tied to the caring of yourself. Um, and for me, sometimes that looked like securing my housing, that look like meeting my dental needs. Other times that look like being social and going outside regularly. It also looked like making sure I was high. It can be so interchangeable. For Joshua, self care is catering to his garden. And there are many 16-year-old Black kids that would say that's not interesting to me. But for someone like Joshua, who was living with a chronic injury that required a lot of intensive care, suddenly, sitting by your garden is very fruitful and very giving. And it's in these examples that we really want the reader to see that self-care is something that you define based on what you need, and you're always able to change that. um yeah.
Now, I love that answer, man. I love it because people don't realize this. I have like a 15-year personal training background, like being in health, in wellness, and that. I was in that hub for 15 something years, and I watched as the industry evolved to something else. I watched as certain waves were ushered in, and it's kind of how I left. I was like, man, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of what's coming down the pipeline because I was seeing the commercialization of certain things, how they was doing it. I was seeing where it was going, and you're right. It's not really a true sense of what wellness is supposed to be.
No.
They're
No.
totally hijacked it. You know what it's like? Small little parallel. The word woke, right? Like these people have hijacked the word woke into something way different than the OGs meant back in the '90s or the '80s to be woke. This some other stuff right here. But they always hijacking and taking this stuff, man.
um Yes. So I see another question from Abdominal Book Gal. What's the significance of the bamboo earring, and was it a conscious decision for it to be on the cover? It was a conscious
Ooh,
decision to be on the cover, and the significance of the bamboo earring is it is very popular Black culture style, especially where I'm from in New York. And growing up, I always had the earring with the name. And to be honest with you, there's something to be said of the image of the unambiguous Black woman with a bonnet and bamboo earrings. And what that image says is going to be different for everybody. But I'm not. It's not uncommon for it to have a kind of negative connotation. We always see the conversations about when the bamboo earring is too big and where the bonnet should be worn. And so it's very much an intentional statement of having sister. I want to make sure that for any Black marginalized gender that sees the cover, that's like, is that for me? Probably, probably. If it's
And
about wellness and you've never seen yourself reflected, you probably see a reflection of yourself in this book.
you had that New York about yourself, of course. We all know, like, even some of the biggest smalls rhymes talk about the bamboo earrings and whatnot. It's such a
Yeah.
classic staple of hip hop in our generation and our era as well. Whenever I saw it, like that's classic, man.
You know, bamboo earrings, at least two pair. You know what it is.
Classic,
You know what it
classic,
is.
man. Classic. I want to ask you a different question, right? So I love talking about all the parts of the book, not just the middle, but all the other parts of it, right? The dedication, your dedication in this book. Now, I love dedication. Whenever I'm writing, most times it's for my grandparents, my mom, my family. People do that. Your dedication is to your goddamn self. Tell us about this choice you made. Dedicate this book to yourself. I loved it. I love seeing that change up. Tell us about
um, the funny thing about this dedication, bro, is it was so unplanned, and I had so many romanticized ideas of who I was gonna dedicate the book to. I would think about it all the time, like, God, I gotta do it to my parents. I gotta do it to the da 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 da. And the months were just unraveling of writing this book and researching for this book and interviewing for this book. And I just got to this point where I handed it in. It was that final draft. I'll never forget. My editor was like, "You got to add your acknowledgement and you got to add your dedication." I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Yeah." So I do the acknowledgement, and honestly, I felt like I had hit everybody. So when I got to the dedication, I was like, nobody was shooting in the gym with me when I was sitting at this desk writing it. I just
it. Sis,
had looked around.
I could leave my own podcast. I'm always saying nobody shot these shots for me. I
It's
can't believe you just
a
said
big
that.
book.
That just happened.
It's a big book, bro. So yeah, that's why I went that route.
I love it. I love it. And you know what's crazy about that, sis, before I move on? In my experience, you would take your time and break your brain trying to list all of these people, and most of them
Mhm.
won't even see it in the book. And you would talk to them like, man, you saw I gave you a shout out. They were like, oh, for real? I didn't even know. So I took my time at 2 in the morning trying to make this deadline. You didn't even see it. So why even go through all of that? Is what I realized 7 books later. Like, come on, man. They're not gonna see it.
They're
They're not.
not gonna see it. They're not gonna see it.
They're not. I want to transition, right? I want to talk about the brother in the book. So you mentioned it earlier. The book is not just you talking. You have various essayists contributing
Mhm.
to it in their own way. The young brother, Joshua Dixon,
Mhm.
was a victim of a vicious, near fatal a dog incident.
Mhm.
Uh, the trials and tribulations he had after the dog situation, all the various painful operations and surgeries, and then going to society, getting ostracized at school, even by the staff,
Mhm.
all the parts of his life, even coming to the point of, nearly a suicidal ideation, things of that nature. Talk about the importance, and talk about Joshua Dixon in this book. That was
Absolutely.
really, really heart wrenching when I read that story.
Um, I always say I don't have favorites. I'm so proud of everybody that's in this book, but I would never lie that I have such Joshua just has such a big chunk of my heart because of his brilliance as a writer as well as a human. Um, but I had first came across Joshua when I was in Miami, and I was just it was during a time when I was having teeth extractions to get prepared for prosthetic teeth. And I just had this feeling of this loss of my body. And how do you just, what is life? What is left? What is my maximum? Just trying to understand what life was going to look like. And I really searched for people that talked about bodies, but not just body positivity, body reality, you know? And you find a lot of the, my weight loss and weight is important and age is important, but there's so many things that happen in the middle. And Joshua was the first person that I found that was talking about that experience in the middle. And he speaks about the loss of certain functions, as well as losing 80% of his face, and what is required to maintain what is left, and the pain and the societal pressure. But he doesn't end, he never ends there. He never ends there. He has a full life. He is an employee. He is a writer. He's a photographer. He's a lover. He's a son. And I just got so much perspective from watching him live out loud. And he will tell you, I probably spent a good year trying to get a hold of him. He was very hard to get a hold of. And when I finally caught his attention, he saw this long stream that I had of, I can't wait to talk to you one day. I'm writing about you either way, because that's the point that it had gotten to, where I was just writing about this young man's Instagram page who brought me hope. And my editor was like, people give their stories. I said, I know, but if I can't get a hold of him, people still need to know the story. But it was by the grace of God that, got a hold of him, and he wrote this essay. And I'm so grateful for the feedback that it is getting. It's reaching people in a way that I feel like he knew it will reach people.
Yeah,
He hit it on the head.
because I think throughout the book, not just that one essay, but throughout the book, even your personal stories in the book, that's more like real life, man. Like all this social media stuff make you think. You said it earlier, right? It seemed like they all getting Jordans and got money. It's not the reality, but the perception is
Yeah.
everybody around me getting it. The perception in the media, everybody look good, everybody's flawless,
Hmm.
everybody's whatever. The reality is, as we get older, we all change in drastic ways. As
Yeah.
you get older, we all things happen, you lose, whatever happens. That's reality. People can relate to that way more than some Instagram model with all these filters and makeup and surgery, whatever. You can relate to your body changing, having
Yes.
access
Yeah.
to that. You said it perfectly. Still living after that,
Yeah.
still being successful after that. That's the real big part of your book throughout the
You
whole book.
know, I started with Care of the Body in the beginning. It was important to let readers know on what I was getting out of my body at its maximum mileage. I wanted to be clear that I was getting it in the streets. I want to be clear I was making stacks. I was bartending. I had my, boobs pushed up to my neck. I was being a little saucy girl, working these restaurants, making that money. And then guess what? The clock stops. Gotta go home. Gotta stop partying. The weight comes on. The teeth start shifting. So by the time you get to the end of my body arc at Care in the Body, I am now somebody who is older, overweight, and needs dentures. So the real goal was to be very honest about a relationship with the body, and to not judge anybody, but to be clear that, I guess, use it till you lose it, but you better have a plan on what life looks like when you lose it. Because for my journey in prosthetic teeth, the physical part was just the half of it. The mental, on being able to see myself as full and beautiful and whole, the same way that I did 15 years ago, that took more work than it might have took for other people, because I had beauty at a standard that wasn't really, it wasn't real. And it was reliant on people outside affirming that it was beautiful. you know.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Let's talk about the structure of your book, how you created the structure of the book, right? And you have your sections, care and the body, care and intersectionality, care, community, and activism. So tell me, first of all, why you have the choice of making these three distinct sections. Second of all, you have some very colorful chapter titles. Now on my Instagram page, I was trying to read some of these titles, but I didn't want to get my page flagged, so I stopped. But on YouTube, we'll give it a try. You ready for this? Are you ready for this? Here we go. My neck, my back. I love this one. Can I hate your order? Not can I take your order? Can I hate your order? Right? This is another one. Oh, the South got something to say. You know I love that being from the South. The South got something to say, right? I love this one. Oh, yeah, the gummy bitch. The gummy bitch, right? I'm gonna leave it on this one. Busting nuts in the anti-abortion state. Busting nuts in the anti-abortion. So tell me about your choices for the chapter titles, and also the sections, if you can.
Um, of course. First of all, thank you for asking, and think it's this is the moment. So much anxiety that I had from the moment this book went to production, where I was like, "Am I prepared for people to read this back to me?" And it's got, I wrote Hood Wellness pretending that no one was going to read it but me, so that I can hold myself to a very honest standard. And then I went through the editing process pretending that somebody else wrote it, so that I would be able to stomach whatever feedback was coming back. So I feel like I'm like integrating myself in the process. As you asked me, I'm grateful. Um, an example, I guess, would be busting nuts in an anti-abortion state. It's actually a serious topic, right? Maternal mortality, anti-abortion, abortion rights, abortion bans. Um, and one thing that I know about pop culture and just the times we live in, people got short attention spans. And I love to be a little bit of a provocateur, to be a little bit funny. And I deliver on every title, right? So in that title for that in an anti-war, that's real. We're actually going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what sexual engagement looks like in the state of Louisiana while there are abortion bans. Um, and we're going to be funny, but we're also going to get a little legal. We're also going to get a little historical, And so some of these titles for the more heavier topics, I think even maybe for myself, it felt better to be funny so that I didn't have this pressure to be so serious. So even with Gummy Bitch, I don't necessarily want nobody to feel bad for me, right? It's not supposed to be like, I get it. It could be rather sad at some moments. Um, but it's also a little, there are moments that, I might not have laughed then, but as I look back and talking about some of those moments, I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny. Um, so I liked using the titles to kind of bring a little bit of a different reflection for readers.
Sure. So let me ask you a question. So when it comes to shopping your book around to publishers, and you mentioned your editor a couple of times in the conversation y'all having y'all feedback back and forth. What was your editor's conversation about these chapter titles and the publisher? What was that like?
You know, uh, People are often shocked when I tell them this, but initially, Hood Wellness was a very starch, very sanitized, very this is how you do community care. And
I
it was
cannot believe that.
I right, I know.
I
I
cannot believe
know.
it. You would
It
not
was,
look if you did write that, you would not be on this show. I'm sorry. You couldn't be sitting right here.
but let me tell you, you know who changed that? Jarvis DeBerry. I consider Jarvis DeBerry from the Times Picayune publication, as well as I think right now he's on like MSNBC, something like that. But he is a New Orleans writer, and I considered him to be edgy, to be provocative, to be, you know, just very ready to challenge people and systems and places. And yet he felt that he was not brave enough in his writing. And that scared me because I was like, if bro, who's coming out swinging, is like, I could have hit harder, it made me be like, okay. So I started to push the envelope a little bit, and I would send it to my editor, be like, yo, I think I'm gonna talk about, and she'd be like, that's brilliant. I was like, really? And I would even go to the publisher and I'd be like, I want to interview these people and I want to add this and I want to talk about this and I'm calling it that. And they were like, that sounds good. And I was always encouraged to be more me. And so that this is the end result. This is me left to my own devices.
Yeah, because in the book world, for those that just watching it and they're outside of the book world, it's a very delicate dance she's trying to dance on, right? Even as a self-published person, right? So the pro is I can pretty much the pros to being self-published for the most part. I can do what I want. I can say what I want. I can do any image I want. But
Mm-hmm.
what am I going to do with that marketing wise? If I say certain things, okay, I can't go to the schools. I can't go to the churches. I can't go to certain spaces. So like, if you do certain things in your book, you're almost painting yourself into a corner for some people. Now, for some people, those things work. Like because you're doing that, it go crazy. So she's
Mm-hmm.
trying to dance in between. My very first book, I had one curse word in the whole book. Now, I don't really curse just to be cursing, just for no reason. I try to minimize my cursing, but I felt for the emphasis of what I was trying to express in that line, that
Mm.
word fit. My mentor, my longtime mentor, convinced me to take it out.
Oh
I
wow.
am so glad I listened because I'm so proud that my book is in so many school libraries now.
Mm.
My book is in so many public libraries now.
Right.
It's
It
in
wouldn't have been
churches.
worth
Like
it. Mm-hmm.
it would have been blocked out of these spaces if that word would have stayed. One word. That's how delicate that dance we got to
And
all
it
dance.
really is. It really is. It really is. But I'll be real with you. I think somewhere when I realized I'm talking about things like stealing food and just being a unpleasant person maybe to work beside, I realized this isn't gonna go in the spaces where we might have thought it could fit, but that's okay because I think I know some other spaces where it can fit, and I think it's good there. I saw a comment, and it's my chat. My screen is, oh, here we are. Abominable book girl. Was your standard of beauty centered in the black beauty standard or the white beauty standard? And I would say both. I would say that I was trying to keep a thin tummy, right? But also I wanted to unbig my back. I wanted a big butt. I wanted the figure that is appealing, I guess, to black people, but I also want to be thin. But I also want to be super pretty. But I also wanted long hair. But I also wanted perfect teeth. I think that if I had to slice and dice it, it was a little bit of everywhere to the point where it was my own standard that was totally warped. So it was the biggest reason why, when it was time to find what pretty looked like for me, it I had to remove all that other stuff because I had defined it by what it looked like on Cardi B and what pretty is on Beyonce and what pretty is on Regina King and what pretty is on everyone else that's telling me on Instagram that this is pretty, and it all looks very good in a Fashion Nova bathing suit, and it all looks very good on a yacht or the beach or these award shows. I don't say this with pride, but I don't say it with shame either. That I am definitely one of those women that too much exposure to what people are saying is beautiful, and my brain will find ways to compare and to measure up when I'm not, centering what's beautiful to me.
That is an awesome, amazing answer, and I think this is why the book I'm advocating this, man, to the wheels fall off. The ladies got to go and get this book. It got to be book talks, book clubs, because especially if you're a mother with a daughter, to get this stuff in your daughter's mind early about
Mhm.
beauty standards and what they're seeing and what's these devices in their face 24/7, what they're inundating themselves with. We got to be able to get in front of that as soon as we can with hood wellness. Um, you speak about being somebody to work with, right? Your coworker. Let's go into the food industry. That chapter was just like, right? Because let's be real. Let's be real with each other right quick. I've been saying this for years in private. By nature, people do judge. That just happens. It's human nature. People judge. If you're in certain industries of work, depending on how you look, it could be advantageous. I didn't make it up. That's what it is. So in your chapter on the food industry, you do a good job. I've never been in the food industry as far as working. Breaking down like restaurants and like these folks get these tables and these folks get the bars and who get the bigger party and who gets sent home early. You break all that minutia down to the details, but predicated on how you look, how you present. You do a good job of giving us fine details and little nuanced things you was doing, working your magic, your congeniality, and your personality. And we'll get to that acting later. We get to that acting background later. But you were playing it up. You was hustling. This New York, right? You getting it in. And the females that couldn't do said thing, they didn't get those tables. They didn't get those tips. They got Bogart out of a table one time. You know what I'm saying? You just jack one. Like, man, it's my table. So, and the manager knew better. But because you were who you were, and you do what you do, you had a certain favor, right? Favor matters. So before I pass it on to you, I'm gonna give you one analogy I heard a long time ago. In basketball for the Lakers, when they get in the championships, right? They said the rule was don't miss the flight. Don't miss the flight. Kareem, Hall of Famer Kareem, he can come late. It's Kareem. Y'all don't miss the flight. So I want to tell my kids all the time that I counsel, life is not about fast. Nothing in life is fast. Life is life.
Mhm.
If you're getting 30 or 40 points a night, you might have more favor than the guy that gets 2 points. That's life. Now, either you're on the right side of it or you're on the other side of it. But this is going to happen.
You're right.
I'll be quiet right there. Take it away, my sister. Food industry.
It was really important to write about not just how I made money, but the complexities of what it required for me to make money. For so many reasons. One is the romanticized idea that as food servers, we there you just make so much money, it's so easy, you're just clocking in. Why do we even have to tip you? You're already making money, when the reality is we're making about $2 or $5 an hour that's being taxed on based on tips that they're assuming that we're receiving, which more often than not you can get stiffed. You cannot make that kind of money. So I wanted to show the politics of food service, but I also wanted to show the consequence of being sexually pervasive, say, and as a requirement for work, because it was a reality that I didn't have to do that. I could have buttoned up like the person whose table I stole, and I could have not flirted at all, and I could have not been nice to managers who I could have played it differently. um but the thing about that is it would have impacted my income. And so I had to rise to this behavior, not because it was innate, but because it was a requirement for me to actually survive.
I have never stopped a guess in my life. I got a question, though, because it's important. You just said the phrase, it wasn't innate, right? But the things you're detailing throughout the book, not just that one moment, but throughout the book, like, did you have to learn those things per se? Like, how did you know to rub this guy's lower back and whisper in his ear about the burger special? How did you know to
Oh,
be a certain way, your posture and your, how did you know that?
I'll tell you how I knew. I
Okay.
knew because I served enough men who might have given me a wink or a little something, and I ignored it and got $10. And then that first time when I winked back and I got 30, I said, "Oh, well, if that's what you needed was a little wink and a shake, well, so you give me enough time, and I might as well been a burlesque dancer because when it was time to make that rent, it was time to make that rent." And the reality is, on top of being the only black bartender, only black server, on top of the expectation to present as exceptional, because this was the establishment, you're only hiring beautiful people, you're only hiring young people, you're only hiring people that are deemed desirable. So I've got to crank it up 10 times. So Heather behind me doesn't have to even button her shirt down to get the shift that I'm getting, but she's not walking out with the money that I'm walking out with. And she's not allowed to make money as long as I am because of the system that's in play and her whether you can say inability or even just opting out and not wanting to play that. Some people would rather make an honest 70 than go home with a fatiguing 350, right? It can come out that way. And I think that for myself, towards those latter years, I was really invested in making money, but I was also resentful in what was required to make that money. And it was heartbreaking realizing that this is who I have to become to keep my lights on. And I'm deeply, desperately unhappy. I'm unfulfilled. I'm not really healthy. I don't have any real relationships. I wanted to be honest with readers if it comes to hustles. Like, hey, if you ever need one, go run up in that Olive Garden. But also, you get too caught up, and all you're gonna have is some bunions and some change because when it's over, it's over. It's a sad part about the cash industry in itself. The food service industry does not really have a ladder to climb up, right? Are you waiting tables or are you bartending? Unless you want to actually own a restaurant or be an actual cook or manager, there's not a lot of options there. Yeah, so it was very important that I was showing the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Um, and I know the
Well,
good was good, the bad was bad.
but let's do it like this, right? Okay, she said in the comments, she said the story sounds similar to Cardi B said about working in a strip club.
Mm.
That's an amazing parallel because I never expected it to play across the board. And see, this is why I say at school, the most important skill you don't learn at school. From pre-K through my master's degree, I never learned social skills at school. I never learned how to move in a room full of vultures like they say at school. I had to pick up on that. Or in this certain environment to do this. In this certain environment, I gotta be able to be a chameleon and transform for this. In this certain environment, school not teaching you how to be social.
No,
And I see so many good people that could thrive, but they lack social skills. So you never get put on, you never get the phone call, you never get in the room, you don't climb the ladder. Not because you're not good, but life is about being way more than good.
absolutely.
Being good,
And
the ground floor is good. The ground floor. Ground floor is good. A lot of good folks are down bad because they don't have these skills. And you had the good. And
I
more
would
people need to
say,
learn this stuff for their job, not just being a waitress, but for
mhm,
their job. You gotta be able to go
right,
to off
for
the
the system,
employee.
exactly, for the system.
Always
And
assist.
I will also, to be clear, please don't no one assume that every little Red Lobster server out here is shaking a little something. I worked in a very specific environment. I worked in Manhattan. I was a career server and bartender. And so, I worked places that have coupons and commercials, and I also worked at speakeasies where you didn't even know where the front door was. And so that was a specific environment. It actually was a restaurant that was, in Midtown, but also, it was one that you had to be pretty, you had to be young, you had to have charisma, and you had to be able to take a table that intended to spend $50 and get them to spend 150. And that just happened to be, as a hustler, as anybody that has been in survival mode, that knows what it looks like to feed a family of four for a week, and you only have $50, you're gonna have to do more than pinch pennies. Like, that's just what it is. And those are skills, as you say, that can transfer to all kinds of different areas.
all
I
kinds
was
of stuff.
able to use that charisma to fundraise, to get
Yeah,
myself an apartment. I was
yes.
able to use that charisma to transition from being a food server to an editor. It does not mean there was no talent involved. It does not mean that it was just, lucky breaks. But it also meant that I had to be very strategic, as well as, use my little hustle skills.
Now, see, let me ask you a question. I've
Hmm.
always wondered this, but now I got an expert to give me an answer. So, in Louisiana, you've been here, like places like Hooters and Twin Peaks and Walk On, we have the girls wearing little cheerleader like outfits.
Hmm.
Can these companies legally like fire you for getting overweight or not looking a certain way anymore? And they hired you like this, but now you gain weight or something about your body just naturally changed. Can they like let you go for that? Is that like legal? Is that discrimination? Like how does that work in that industry? I never understood.
I know the way that I've seen it work is, there are shifts that are more profitable than others. Weekend night shifts, brunch shifts, right? If, say, you were that individual that got some good shifts, suddenly you would see your schedule change. Um, and there are these compromises that will happen. There are compromises in dynamic. The one of the biggest challenges one of the biggest challenges in food service. I'm sorry, I try to catch the comments as they come up. But one of the biggest challenges in food service is that there's no human resources more often than not. So here we are on the floor, right? It's a busy Thursday night. There's alcohol flowing. There's a bartender. There's a host up front who knows nothing going on in the back. There are men in the kitchen, usually predominantly men, cooks that are cooking, that are in their own world, in their own zone, and there's a management staff, and they are concerned about money. So when you are in these times of, say, you're discriminated against, or you're sexually, something happens, there's really nowhere to go. So when you find these moments where you're no longer as received on the floor, and you gain weight, and no one's actually said to you you've gained weight, but suddenly you're not getting those shifts, suddenly you're not feeling as welcomed, suddenly you're getting cut a little bit more than often. This is when you're of that reality. And that was why there was the woman who referenced in Can I Hate Your Order that I stopped making good money when I gained weight. And while that is not everyone's testimony, it is still reflective to a bigger experience of people that are in this industry. And we gain weight or we get older, things happen. And to pretend that our looks and our bodies do not play a part in this billion-dollar industry is bananas.
That's
And
what I
to
want to
what you're
highlight.
saying, Abdominal, does it go to every industry? Probably does. Yeah, so I imagine, because retail, I've heard this also with retail. There are these places where you are chosen on this aesthetic, and I'm sure businesses too. You're a lawyer, you've got a firm, who's
Yes,
gonna be your receptionist, who's the
yes,
youngest, thinnest. So,
yes,
but that's the
yes.
key with Hood Wellness. No one in this book is here to say we claimed this experience. What we're here to say is this is how I experienced it there. Here's
Yes,
some background information on other people who have experienced it like this. This is a good time for you to consider whether you're a data operator, or you are working in an office, or you're a teacher, wherever you work. This is a good time for you to consider your politic, how life changed for you when you gained 50 pounds or came back looking a little older.
yeah. I totally agree. I totally agree. Before we move on from the food, I love that topic. There was a video I saw earlier in the week. about tipping, about tipping. So you being a professional, once again, you instruct us. We go into a restaurant, we go into walk-ons, we go into Chili's, whatever you going. How should we tip, in your opinion? From your time, how should we tip?
Um, I mean, I know that the minimum is 15%. I've never I rarely, should I say, rarely tip less than 18%. But I want to say this as an asterisk to black diners, because this is something that's very important. One, they always play us and they say we don't know how to tip. We don't tip. The reality is two things going on. One, people that's eating at restaurants with his coupons and commercials are not your big spender that's going to tip. That's on period. So when we're talking about Olive Garden, Fridays, Red Lobster, if that tip isn't automatic, you're getting people that came in that don't normally come in. So the last thing they care about is me keep my lights on. Okay, they came in for that deal, and as far as I'm concerned, as they're concerned, tipping me is taken out of that deal.
Hey man, they want that 2 for 20. They
You
want that two
understand
for
what I mean?
twenty.
Exactly right.
2 for 20.
So I really say that's when we blame the game, because these restaurants can absolutely factor in tip. It still is inappropriate to not tip your server. But what I say outside of that is I come from a family of six. My father would take us out. We are all unambiguously black people. We lived on Long Island, which is, while our neighborhood was, constantly changing, there are black people there, and we always got shitty service. And my father always left 15 to 18%. And then the server would always come back. I want to thank you guys again. Thank you so much, because this was so amazing. And it wasn't a real thank you. It was a thank you that was really an apology for not giving us the service that we respect, that we deserved. And so never would I ever tell any human being to give someone money who did not value your service. And I don't say that as a way to look for a reason to not tip your server, but I would be remiss if I acted like we live in a world where black diners don't get as good service as everybody else. So if that is the case, then handle it at your discretion. Call the manager, do what you need to do. But if you went out and you had a good time and they picked up your little napkins, you asked for ranch, they got you a little ranch, you had to drink, tip how you supposed to tip.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
really it's
Yeah.
part of the dining experience. And if you
Yeah.
don't have it, then go somewhere where you don't gotta do it.
Okay. Okay. Last question for this. How should we tip when they give us an 18% gratuity added to the check already?
That
Before
is
you
the
even get
tip.
it, so
That
so
is the tip.
they already tipped. They good. You're good. The
Yeah, if
customer.
the gratuity is in there. But I will also add something that I like to do is sometimes you get a vibe by the time the food comes out if this server is I don't know. Sometimes there's an attitude of like the tip is included, so what do I care? And it's important to make sure that you're still getting service. So I don't want to say here, the tip is supposed to be included, but never is the abandonment of taking care of the table included also. Because sometimes it happens, I'm going out sometimes, and once they know that tip is included and you order those drinks, they're like, "Dad, don't do me like that just because you're getting the money." You know what I mean? Go get me some more water, please.
I want to definitely hit on this chapter right here coming up. I want to hit on this chapter. It's so impactful. I think it pretty much it stopped me the most as I was reading it. Like the emotion made me just put the book down and sit back and ponder. Right. Um, the book, A Roadmap for Leaving the Body.
Mm,
A roadmap for leaving the body. Miss Holly Rains. Right. Let me lay it down for the viewers. So the chapter before, you speak about your experience whenever this lady and her sons, she's dying the last part of her life. They go on a road trip. I love that idea. This road trip to physically tell people bye, have some last moments, have a last hug, as she's about to transition. And of course, she can't spend time with you, and you detail how that went. And then the follow up chapter is her own words. Now, I had never heard a person talk about their pain and how much pain they was in, and like they're ready to leave. Like, I don't want no experimental drugs. I'm ready to pretty much take whatever pill and go to sleep. How she hurting and just what she's going through, and she don't want her sons to see her like that. And she was so transparent about those last parts of her life. Reading those two chapters was just so rough for me. Dealing with mortality and dealing with losing loved ones in the past, and things to come. So talk about those two chapters, please.
So, Holly Raines, she really was one of the, I guess you could say, flames that like sparked the change in the book, because it was supposed to be initially interview style, me question, essays answer type situation. But the thing with Holly was there was no need to ask her any questions. This was a woman who was very clear on what she wanted to say and what she wanted to share. And I just remember not wanting to get in her way. And so I basically hit play and let her talk. And this was the formula that was used for every other essayist, with the exception of Joshua, as well as the woman Lydia, where they were just allowed, they just wrote, and I was their editor. Um, but Holly really wanted to present an example for Black and Brown women with cervical cancer and let them know of different options as well as symptoms, and how things can change and how to handle that change. And I only knew her from social media, and we were very kind and talked often. And I assumed maybe we would meet one day. So having her actually drive to New Orleans from San Diego I was just kind of blown away. Um, and what's yesterday is the 1 year anniversary of her passing. Yeah. Um, Yesterday is the anniversary, and the reality is that was recorded in January, and she left us 8 weeks later. So there was not even enough time to get it back to her and get that last read, because I wanted her to know you just did something I've never seen before, and you've given something that I don't know how this has been given before like this.
Mm.
If so, someone will have to show me, because I've never seen a woman say, I'm dying, and this is what wellness looks like for me and my family. This is how I'm preparing to say goodbye. This is what I'm sad to leave. This is what I'm excited about. The fact that she was still a woman of excitement
Yeah,
and love and intrigue. Um,
yeah.
I'm grateful that she was so generous.
Man, that was powerful because I had this one friend I've met on Instagram, and she's a grief counselor. And we talk a lot about grief. And for us, that's still here grieving, like, how do we navigate? How do we move? I've never heard the words of the person that's leaving. That was the first for me. And that was incredibly unique and different. And once again, so many of us lost people in COVID and other things have happened that we lost people. We need this healing. We need this information. We need this. What she's saying is definitely needed for the community.
Right. I know, it's very beautiful. Um, and I hope that it encourages more of us to get cervical cancer, tested for cervical cancer, um, to stay on top of screenings, our pap smears. I mean, even hearing her detail the symptoms, and one day I felt like this, and I, I still read that and I think to myself, there's no way this isn't going to help someone. We're always waiting for the most severe symptom. right? We're always waiting for it's like, and then I couldn't move. And the pain was so bad then. And she's actually telling us it was a whisper, a little constipated, a little uncomfortable. And then a couple weeks later, I was more and more uncomfortable. And then it got to the point. And I don't know if she realized how powerful that was to be able to share that.
One little small caveat within her chapter that blew my mind, right? She spoke about on a road trip how difficult it was to find happy music.
Yeah.
Like most things, because people relate to sadness so much. Most songs about, breaking up and this going on and that. It was so hard to find happy music. I found that, like, that's an incredible thing to think about.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting when she said that because I guess happy. It's funny. I guess you only really realize happy music when you're maybe not happy. Because in when she first said it, I was like, well, I'm thinking of all these songs, and I'm like, this happy song and that happy, and then I was thinking, and I was like, oh no, that's not Bill Withers happy. That's not the happy that. And it's amazing when you realize that, and even her saying that statement, I'm like, what else am I not realizing that is not as deeply fulfilling as I'm thinking it is?
Yeah. Um, Me being a hip hop person, right, a music head, right? I tell my friends all the time, like, you just close your eyes and just put the music on the radio and just listen. People say, "Oh man, I love her. She real. She real. She real" is a symbol of I relate to that story. But so many people are down and out. You're downtrodden. You had to struggle, the struggle story. You had to come up. So you relate to that. So that sells more. All of that happy whatever stuff, they feel I can't relate to that. So they say something like, "Man, he not real. He not real. He not down. He not 10 toes down. Cause I didn't go to jail." Like the psychology of how we are is crazy as consumers.
It
You
is.
know, it's crazy. Let's think about the editing part, right? So you are an editor yourself. What was it like going through the editing phase in your publication with the editor, being that you are an editor? I love asking my editor writer friends that question, like, what was your editing process? What were those notes back and forth?
So we actually used several editors. And it was because one, this is really the this body of work. You're dealing with third party testimonies and essays and things of that nature, and it requires a level of understanding about Black culture and even language. And I couldn't help but notice with the initial editor a bit of a challenge that was being had with understanding the framework and the language. And then we had another editor join us, and that was fun. What I would say about the process, I Toni Morrison says it best that the best editors get out of the way and amplify the writer, right? Get these words out. And that's always my vision as a writer. And as an editor, that's what I want to do with the writer. I don't want to see my imprints on a book that I edited. It's all of it, right? And so there was a lot of changing that was suggested with the first editor. I think that these testimonies should go in the back. I think your story should be chronological order. I think that Holly's story, it's nice, but she's not that marginalized, and it sounds like she has health insurance, and there is a lot of feedback that it was like sucking the soul out of the book. But I didn't want to be that editor that was like, you can't critique me. So
Friends,
I entertained some of these ideas, and one of them was the chronological and things like that, and I presented it, and she loved it, and I said I hate it. I don't even like this book anymore. And it was like a moment where I think we all realized you can't play with this. This is not you. It to play with it is you got to ask yourself why are you playing with it. So when they read it, it's better. So it is award worthy. Don't play with it. Leave it as it is. Our clunky little stories, our lives, our experiences, and that's the book. So I like to say a lot of times the editing process is like taking your bicycle and putting it through the car wash every day for 3 months. You're gonna have a very clean car. If that joint was purple when you first brought it back, it's looking pink now. The chain look funny. It's clean. It's clean. It even gonna smell good. You might have had a little honk honk. You like, where's my little things? Is just not the same. So there's a thing with editing, and we really tried not to over edit this book. We cleaned it up. You know what I mean? We made sure that she was
See,
presentable to go outside.
let's go back to why I do this show. Let's go back to the purpose of this show. Let me reset the table for my people out there. A lot of my viewers are writers. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
my viewers want to write a book. They haven't
Mm-hmm.
done it yet. A lot of my viewers are self-published like myself. We're always discussing in private. Man, the Penguin Publishing House finally called my phone. How willing am I to change my work? How willing am I to do all of what you just said, the song and dance? That's why the movie American Fiction is so good that came out a few months ago about the experience of a black writer in that publishing machine. Like, it's the real make or break choice you gotta make as an artist. And be true to myself and sell the copies I sell over here in the corner out the trunk. Or I can go to the big publishing company and have my book at Walmart and the big 6 foot sign everywhere and the airports. Like, what am I willing to lose of myself to do that? You got to play with those dynamics.
You know, and
Yeah, man.
and and it I'm so grateful that we are in this climate where I chose art and I chose truth over I literally honestly Jarvis DeBerry was with me through so much of this process mentally because just constantly thinking I wish I would have been braver. I'm like anytime I feel like I might return it at I'm like nah, put that back, put that back, put that back, put that back. And
Sis,
so
I
you
gotta
know what
find
I
this dude, man. I gotta find this brother, bro. I don't know the brother. I gotta find this brother, man. You said it more than one time.
oh my gosh, one of the greatest journalists of this century and one of the best writers out of New Orleans. Like this, he's just sick. He's sick. Um, and that that was always his vibe. And I gotta say, I always chose art, and even up until today, and I'm told by my publisher, hey, Walmart is gonna carry us. Hey, Target's gonna carry us. Hey, you got a Kirkus Star review. So I'm hoping that this book is a testament to Black writers. You don't got to water down nothing. You don't got to change. Don't make it to the white gaze. Don't dilute it. Leave it. Be your wildest, weirdest self. Tell your story. Be loud. Be flamboyant. Hit every note you want to hit.
And we playing the long game, right? I'm praying off of the heels of this book, the success of this book, man, that next book gonna be crazy. The next book gonna be, man, that's what I'm praying to happen. Because most times this studying this game, it takes that momentum to where that third or fourth book is like
Yeah.
at the park, and people think, oh, that's the first book. Like, nah, I wrote 3, 4 books way back here. Oh, let me go and find the back work. You know what I'm saying? So I'm hoping that's what happens with good wellness.
Me too.
It's a good springboard.
Me
Right?
too.
So that's one last question on that. What advantage do you have as a writer having an editing background? Because you mentioned Toni Morrison. I can think of some other classical writers. They had an editorial background to their life. So what was the advantage you think you have being an editor, if there's any advantage at all?
I think that the biggest advantage is the fact that I have a very strong command of what I'm writing. So when it comes to the editing process, more often than not, I'm not really looking to be entertained in regard of if this is the material that will work. And I think that especially for Black authors, after we get signed, this is kind of where we get played, right? Because you get signed for this idea. This publishing house saw that you can make this body of work. They believe that you can make this body of work. But then now you're in the confines of your editor, and suddenly there's these new ideas, right? And they're not always the biggest shifts. Sometimes they're just small. Why don't you change it like this? And you can entertain it. And what I know to be true as a writer is the vulnerability that comes with that, and the need and the knowing that you want your work to look as good as possible. So you're more likely to acquiesce to an editor and not work with, like, okay, instead of even asking why, or what if I did this? Um, because your editor is not supposed to be like a doctor. It's not supposed to be this black and white diagnosis, right? It's like this and it's like that. And you got, well, maybe not. Maybe it's supposed to be, maybe I wanted to be like that. I just didn't hit it good enough. So without that dialogue and that kind of creative understanding, I think it's hard. But because I have been an editor, I know what it looks like when I don't have that room or range. So it was a lot easier for me, I think, coming into it as an editor, to know what would work for the book. I worked with one, for example, her name is Neva, brilliant woman, and Neva had such vision with Hood Wellness in its layout, and understood, like, this is almost like a zine. This is not a formula one by one. She's like, this is supposed to be a little splatter. This is supposed to be a little, random storytelling. And was helping me to make it orderly, even in its own kind of chaos. Um, and there was someone in the Kirkus review that had noted that it has a kind of rhythm to it. That was never,
It
you know,
definitely does. It
yeah.
definitely
And
does.
that was my editor. That was the one of that
To
was
me,
the most
it's an
amazing
art.
editor.
Yeah. It's not like it's random and it's just no. It's definitely well put together, well
It's
constructed, in my opinion.
so much of that was never.
So, as an editor yourself, going forward, after your experience with this, how does that change you when you edit to somebody else going forward? How are you a different editor now from this experience?
If I had to keep it a buck,
I want a
I
buck
would
50.
say I'm the same, and I would say that I feel even more affirmed in my strategy. Um, first of all, I say never trust an editor that doesn't have 1,000 questions about your work. This is I'm getting paid. I'm getting paid off your book. So I should have a very thorough understanding of what it is you're trying to say. And that means that I've got to make a lot of effort to understanding what it is you're trying to say. And so, there's a lot of question asking, and there's a lot of understanding and making sure that you're convinced that you hit the nail on the head. And then there's those times when you're not. And you're like, I kind of don't know what to do there. And I love that. For me, that's not when I come in with suggestions. That's when I come in with, what do you want this to end with? What's the bottom line here? And it's always going back to the writer. And I think I was more affirmed with that in this process, because even with a lot of my own editors, it was in those moments where I was like, got it.
Okay, okay. Thank you very, very much for that. As I said to you in private, we can easily do a whole 4 hour show on all of these topics and things you covered in this book. It's just so much, right? I'm gonna end on this part right here. Your chapter in the book about there's no safe space for us. There's no safe space really for black women. There's no safe space for black and brown males. You live in a lot of places. You lived in big places. You lived in small places. You well traveled person. Tell us about no safe space, man.
Um, you know, it, if I started with growing up on Long Island, and my own family, the mailbox getting blown up, and Both of my brothers have been subjected to various forms of violence from white people. Um, and there was violence around us in neighboring towns, as well as violence that was in New York City. And New York is often romanticized as a place where you are safe from white supremacy and you are safe from the things that stem from white supremacy, and that's not true. And I lived in Miami, which was also, I lived in a rough part of Miami, but it was also during the time of the Trump era. And there were a lot of Cubans for Trump. And I wasn't safe there either. And I lived in New Orleans, but with all due, I lived on the white side of New Orleans. So I and to be frank, I don't remember those white people being very safe either. There was all kinds of violence and drunken violence and local violence too. Local violence, you know what I mean? And so even the idea of going to places that are relatively safe, I wasn't necessarily relatively safe. And I think it would be different for everyone and everyone's perception. I don't want everyone to feel like you're not safe where you are. I can only say with my budget and my intersection, trying to find places to live where I'm like, oh, I feel really safe in this neighborhood. I know that I know white people. There's a feeling of safety that white people feel. I ain't never hit it. And to me, if that ain't equal, then I'm not. If I'm not as safe, I'm not safe.
Right, because even beyond your personal budget, right? Some of us know people that are very affluent, and they live in these gated. You need to go put the little passcode in communities, and I have the private conversation with them about what it's like living back there, and they still tell me some wild stories. To where my mind thinking like, I'm not paying that kind of money to feel like that. So even is that safe? Even if you live back there, like I'm not. And what their kids go through, these private high and mighty schools, what their kids go through. Again, I'm not paying that kind of money for my child to feel like that. So where is safe is a complex question for all of us.
Very much so. And I, as a New Yorker, I
Complex
wanted to
question.
be clear about that. And I wanted to be clear about what living looks like in the South as well in the North and what you actually get in regard of quality of living. And so I might have been bored, not bored by the culture, from my own isolation of COVID, right? My own living by myself, learning how to eat again and talk again and just being a new person. But it doesn't change that there was still a lot of opportunity for me in New Orleans. My career exploded in New Orleans. The black writer scene in New Orleans literally saved me. The writer community in my neighborhood was stronger than anything that I had access to in New York City, because it tends to be in New York City, it's very much of what school did you go to, who are your friends. Whereas in New Orleans, it was about what are you working on. So suddenly I'm legitimized and I'm able to work with people in ways that were really cool. So again, safety, making a living is very subjective, and I just try to do my best to be honest about it.
It's a, it's a very, very deep topic, and at a lot of points in our life, a lot of us are relocating for various reasons, or we just trying something different, right? So we all talking in private, like, man, this state got these certain laws they just passed. I don't want to live over there in this state. Our kids got to deal with this in this state. You trying to really like you juggling a lot, trying to figure out just the best place to land. That's tough for all of us.
Right? It really is. It really is. So I'm hoping that we factor where we live into our wellness. So
Absolutely.
sometimes we get a little hard on ourselves. Sometimes you got to look across the street. You got to look at the local newspaper and figure out exactly how much where you live is playing a part on your quality of life.
Because you lived in the South and other places, right? A lot of times in the South, we're so narrow minded with the little blinders, like, man, the minimum wage is this over here. But you're not factoring in what they're paying in gas and other things that they're paying taxes or whatever. Like, it really, really evens out. You're not really getting the come up. You just think mathematically, if I made that, I'm gonna be good.
Right.
But a single bedroom closet, room closet, costs so much there. So interesting. It's very interesting.
It is. It is.
Very interesting topic, man. You cover so much in this book. I'm just singing his praises. Hood wellness, the must have, male and female. Male and female. Go out there, support the sister. Comes out in June. Put it on your summer list, but go out there and pre-order it right now. It helps the authors out. Pre-order their work, demand their work, write the publisher, write whoever. Support the sister, man. Great, great people. Brilliant sister. I look forward to more out of my sister, man. Thank you very much for the Sean P experience. Thanks for coming.
No, thank you. This was such an honor. I had so much fun talking about it. Thank you. You've been so supportive, and I've always been a fan of your platform. So I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Don't leave, my sister. But for my guest, we are out of here on the Sean P experience. There's another great guest lined up. I told you I got guest booked until like May. Like every week till May. My April is crazy. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but we gonna do it on the Sean P experience. Peace.
Bye.